Have you ever really wondered what goes on inside a therapy room? It can feel like this total black box, right? Well, today, we're going to crack it open. And I want you to think about therapy not just as talking, but as a kind of architecture. It's this careful process of, taking down the old shaky structures inside us to build something new, something much, much stronger.
So let's meet Arjun. And I think this feeling is something a lot of us can relate to. On the outside, everything looks great, but inside, there's just this heaviness. Nothing's really wrong, but nothing feels right either. And that's what brings him to therapy.
So this is the big question, isn't it? It's one thing to say you feel heavy, but how does a therapist take that vague feeling and actually turn it into a blueprint for change? Well, we're going to follow Arjun's story, session by session, and find out exactly how it's done.
Okay, let's start right at the very beginning. Arjun's first session. This is where the therapist, Dr. Desai, starts to look for clues, not just in what Arjun is saying, but in everything he isn't saying too.
A good therapist is kind of like a detective. Just look at these details. He gets there early, but waits outside so he's not a bother. He sits on the very edge of the sofa, almost like he's ready to flee at any second. He even apologizes for being there, for taking up space. Every single one of these actions is a clue.
And here we go. This is the first major piece of the puzzle. There is a huge gap between the content, what Arjun says, and the process, what his body and his actions are doing. He's saying, I'm fine, but his body is screaming, I'm terrified. That contradiction, that's the therapist's entry point.
All of this points to something called a life script. It's basically this hidden rule book we all have that we learned as kids to stay safe and feel loved. And Arjun's rule, a rule he doesn't even know he's following, is this. My needs are a burden. To be valued, I have to be as low maintenance as possible. It's why he apologizes for just existing.
So we jump forward a few sessions. Things are moving along, but then they hit a wall. And this is so important to understand. Progress in therapy is almost never a straight line. Sometimes you have to hit a wall, what's called a rupture, to really move forward.
So Arjun's telling this story about his boss basically stealing his work. He's trying to play it off like it's no big deal, that he just laughed about it, but Dr. Desai sees his jaw and it is clenched tight. She sees the anger his body is holding and she gently points it out. She asks him,
I'm wondering if you're actually furious.
And look at his response. It's an immediate shutdown. Poof. The second a dangerous emotion, like anger, gets named, his brain just hits the eject button. He doesn't just say no, he completely disconnects from the entire thought. He goes blank.
This going blank thing, it has a name. It's a defense mechanism called dissociation. His mind learned a long, long time ago that when a feeling like anger seems too threatening, the safest thing to do is just check out. It's a strategy that absolutely kept him safe, but now it's keeping him stuck.
And this right here illustrates one of the most powerful dynamics in therapy, rupture and repair. Dr. Desai moved a little too fast, and it caused a rupture. But instead of pushing him, she sees him withdraw, and she repairs the connection. She backs off and basically says, okay, that was too much. Let's make sure you feel safe. And paradoxically, it's these moments of breaking and then rebuilding trust that make the relationship even stronger.
So you have to ask, where did this deep fear of anger and this be low maintenance script even come from? Well, to figure that out, Dr. Desai has to go back and look at the original architectural plans, Arjun's childhood.
Now, to most of us, no arguments ever might sound pretty good, but for a therapist, that's a massive red flag. Because what it usually means isn't that everyone was happy, but that there was absolutely no room for disagreement. Conflict was seen as a threat that could destabilize the whole family.
and there it is. That's the core memory. As a little kid, Arjun learned this absolutely devastating equation. If I express my real feelings, the person I depend on most in the world will emotionally withdraw from me. So, to keep her close, he had to silence himself. Keeping the peace became way more important than being real.
There's a clinical term for this. It's called introjection. It's a fancy word that means you basically swallow a rule whole without ever questioning it. And the rule he swallowed was, my autonomy, my own separate needs and feelings, actually hurts the people I love. And now that rule runs all of his adult relationships.
Okay, so we've identified the old, shaky blueprint. This is where the real work, the rebuilding, begins. The therapy room becomes this safe laboratory where Arjun can practice a totally new way of being, starting with his relationship with Dr. Desai herself.
This seems like such a small thing. Dr. Desai runs late.
And Arjun's below-maintenance script kicks right in. Oh, it's absolutely fine, don't worry about it. But she doesn't let it go. She gently challenges him, giving him permission to be annoyed. And he takes this huge risk and says, well, it is a bit unprofessional. For him, this is like climbing Mount Everest.
So what's happening here is a classic example of what's called transference. He's unconsciously projecting all the feelings and expectations he had with his mother onto Dr. Desai. In that moment, he isn't expecting his therapist to get upset. He's expecting his mom to get quiet and sad. He's bracing for that old familiar rejection.
But that's not what happens. She just validates his feeling. She agrees with him. And this is what's called a corrective emotional experience. It's new data. It proves to his nervous system in a very real way that his feelings are not destructive, that a relationship can actually handle disagreement. This one little interaction starts to literally rewire decades of old programming. So, after practicing in the safety of the therapy room, after building this new foundation, it's time for Arjun to take this new skill out into the most important arena of all, his actual life.
And this is it, the breakthrough moment. He sets a pretty simple boundary with his fiancée, fully expecting it to cause a huge problem, but instead of rejection, he gets understanding. He gets connection. And the result isn't that old heaviness of guilt, but a new feeling, lightness.
And that feeling of lightness, that's the feeling of finally putting down the weight of having to manage everyone else's feelings. He tolerated the intense anxiety of setting a boundary, he didn't dissociate, and he discovered that on the other side of that fear wasn't rejection, it was real intimacy.
And that brings us to the end of Arjun's journey. Dr. Desai's final words here just reframe everything so beautifully. The nice guy persona was never a flaw. It was a guard, a protective strategy that did its job when he was a kid, but it's a job that's just no longer needed.
So, Arjun's story really shows us that therapy is about getting to know those old guards we built to protect ourselves, thanking them for their service, and then finally finding the courage to let them stand down, so the real person behind them can finally step into the light. And that really just leaves us with one last question to think about. What guards are you ready to let go of?